And I'm bummed because, I mean, I'm excited to read it, but I'm bummed because that would clearly have been one of the notable 20s if in fact it's coming out this fall. So just a heads up that that may be coming. And if it is, it'll be one of the biggest bestsellers, obviously, probably of this year and next year. Okay, I got that out of the way. Now, the second thing I want to say is that, as Leah said, this has been a really strange year for everyone in every way possible. The tentacles of the COVID-19 pandemic run very, very wide and very, very deep. And it has impacted the book publishing world just like it's impacted every other aspect of life, including a lot of ways we never even thought of ahead of time. In the spring, when everything started closing, the knee-jerk reaction of publishers was to pull books and just push them off to the fall on the theory that by the fall, we'd be back to normal, which I think a lot of us did think. If you can go back 6 months and think about where our heads were in March, right? We all sort of thought that's what was going to be. And A, we're not normal. B, they didn't push back all the books that had been scheduled for the fall. And so we find ourselves with this massive glut. And in fact, there's been a huge uptick in demand for books because people have been dying to do stuff like read. So in hindsight, maybe they shouldn't have pushed off the books, but there's nothing we can do about that now. The Bolton book, the Mary Trump book, a huge demand over the summer for books on racism in the wake of the Black Lives Matter movement and the protests that have been going on all over the country. These have put huge strains on book printing companies. They don't have the supplies because no one has supplies for anything. And so there's a backlog at the printers, and it's creating this ridiculous ripple effect in the book publishing world. So there are delays everywhere. There are delays in getting the books printed. There are delays in getting the books to the distributors. There are delays in getting the books from the distributors to us. We have to quarantine everything when it comes in. When a book comes back from being checked out to somebody, it has to be quarantined before we can put it on hold for somebody else. The ripple effect of this just goes on and on and on. You all got these, and the publication dates in them were correct when I made them last week. But I am certain they're probably already not correct, and they will continue not to be correct as we go on. And so these are aspirational, these are a guideline. If you're looking for a book that's in these and you don't see it, just contact me and I'll tell you what's going on with it. So with that as background, we'll talk about 20. So let me just say, these are the usual handouts. I think all of you have attended in the past, so you know how this rolls. There's one new handout this time. I pulled short stories and put them together with essays in their own little handout. Collectively, in these handouts, there are 453 books, which is I know that's a ridiculous sounding number, but this is a tiny, tiny slice of what is actually coming out this fall and early winter. If people want, you all have the PDFs of these handouts. If you want a physical printout, just email me and I'll get it to you. The other thing to say is that usually when I do the Notable 20, I start from 30 to 35 books that everyone is talking about and that are showing up on all the lists. And that is also not the case this year. There's just too many books and there's too many hot button issues on the nonfiction side. So if you Google most anticipated books of fall 2020, and you pull up 15, 20 lists, the number of books that overlap on those lists is tiny, tiny. There isn't, the ones that do overlap, we're going to talk about tonight, but in putting together this list of 20, I had to really think about what I know of you guys and what it is that you are particularly excited about. Jane was actually on the desk with me when I was finalizing the list, and she watched me struggle, and we'll talk about it when I get to that book, with getting to 20. I was really not sure. So this is just another unusual, another symptom of how, or example of how unusual everything is right now. So what I'm going to do is I have a slideshow, and I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to go through the books. And for Jane Kleiman, who's on the phone, I will make sure to say the title and the author and the publication date so you can get it, Jane.
Thank you. Okay.
Some of you are on mute, some of you aren't. There's no reason to be on mute if you don't want to be. It is fine to interrupt me. I'm always looking to take a deep breath and a breather. So if you have a question about a specific book or about something I've said in the context of the book, interrupt me or throw the question in the chat. Leah can monitor it and she can interrupt me, or we can talk about the questions at the end, whatever you guys want. But when I share my screen and we do the slideshow, I'm not going to be able to see all of you. So normally when we do Zoom, you do this and I see you, and I'm probably not going to be able to until we all come back together. Just with that caveat. So, okay, so. So this is the first book. Everybody but Jane can see this. The first book is FREDRIK Bachman's Anxious People. It is the only book that we're going to, actually that's not true. Yesterday it was true that this was the only book on the Notable 20 that had been released. As of today, there are a couple more. FREDRIK Bachman is one of those authors whose books I own. I own every single book he's written. In fact, those of you who can see me, I own Anxious People, his new book, because it came out last Tuesday and I went and bought it. His most famous book, and it is called A Man Called Ove. I suspect most of you have read it. If you haven't, you need to leave this call immediately and go to your local bookstore and get your hands on the book and read it, because I think our copy is always checked out. It was an early example of what's come to be known as uplit, where you have some disgruntled, grumpy, often older person who is very disappointed in life and who suddenly becomes part of a very warm and embracing community and becomes a kinder, better person. And his other books are similar in vein, and they're just a joy to read. He's Swedish and he's a journalist by trade. And so the writing has a very, very distinct tone. And I don't know anyone else who writes like him. And I find all of his books incredibly engaging. Anxious People, the plot, I think all you need is the plot, and you're all going to want to read this book. The premise of the book is that a guy tries to rob a bank and he fails, and he flees the bank and he runs into the nearby apartment building where there is an open house going on in an apartment, and he takes the people in the apartment hostage. So you have a young married couple who are expecting a baby. You have an older married couple who have concerns about their marriage. You have a wealthy, successful person who doesn't quite have her life together. You've got the real estate broker. You've got a mysterious man locked in the apartment's only bathroom. And you have what I am sure is probably half really, really funny, half very moving and emotional stuff that's going to go on during that hostage situation. This is one of the few books that has shown up on a ton of the most anticipated book lists. It's gotten terrific reviews. There's already a long hold list for it at the library, but feel free to add yourself. Again, that's Anxious People by FREDRIK BACKMAN, and it is already out. The second book is called Agent Sonia. It's by Ben McIntyre, and it came out today. Ben McIntyre is a British journalist. He writes for the Times of London, and he is one of the best writers of history that I've encountered today. He focuses on World War II and the Cold War. My favorite of his books, he's written 9 books. My favorite one is called Operation Mincemeat, which is about a harebrained scheme the Allies hatched to make Hitler think that the invasion was going to be someplace other than Normandy. It was a riveting book. His most recent book, The Spy and the Traitor, won a bunch of awards, and it's about a double KGB agent. Agent Sonia is about a woman who is being called the most successful female spy of the entire 20th century. She spent World War II living in the Cotswolds in a small town with her husband and 3 children. Her husband, who it turns out was also a spy, was a machinist. Nobody in the village had the slightest idea that they were anything other than an unassuming English family. She was a colonel in the Soviet Army, a veteran agent, and a dedicated communist. And while she was in England, she gathered enough information to send to the Soviet Union to help them build their first atomic bomb. Over the course of her life, over the course of her life, she was hunted by the Chinese, the Japanese, the FBI, MI5, and the Nazis, and she evaded all of them. She is someone you want to have over for dinner. In any event, I know, right? Ben McIntyre got his hands on her diaries, her letters, and a bunch of other information that I suspect had been classified and just got unsealed. And I can't wait to read this. And I know he's really good at this kind of stuff. And so I think it's going to be a very readable book and a super interesting book. And again, that came out today, Agent Sonia.
Hey, Cindy, real quick, Willie wanted to know if you could let them know what category you're in right now.
Right. Thank you, Willie. That's great. So I make a point of covering of including in the Notable 20 at least one book from every genre that's in the handouts. So Anxious People was in literary fiction. Agent Sonia is in history and politics. And I will say that about each book, Willie.
Thank you.
Okay, book 3, which is the essay collection I chose for the Notable 20, is called More Than a Woman, and it's by Caitlin Moran. Caitlin Moran, at the age of 16, left her home and moved to London, and against what strikes me as ridiculous odds, became a successful writer for a music magazine, with all of the entree to the music scene in the UK that meant at the age of 16. Just imagine that for a minute. She's written a few autobiographical novels about that experience, but several years ago, she wrote a book that became a huge bestseller called How to Be a Woman, which was an essay collection about, if you will, feminism and the patriarchy and all things womandom or womanhood. She's turned her focus into a very successful journalism career. She writes several columns a week and has a very big following across the pond. More Than a Woman is what happens when her thoughts on all of those subjects advance into her middle age. Is it okay to be a feminist and have Botox? Why are hangovers so much worse when you reach a certain age? That's a very good question. Why do your clothes not fit the way they used to? And, you know, why is your to-do list always getting longer and longer? These sort of things. She's super funny and spot on to my mind in her observations and her ability to suss out hypocrisy, which means she's just super, super smart. So I love her. I'm really looking forward to this book. This came out today, and it's already out in the UK. It's getting tremendous press, and she's been on all the interview circuits, and she's just a hoot. Okay, so that was the essay collection. Book 4. Okay, so don't hate me for including this book. Jane, book 4 is Rage by Bob Woodward, which also came out today. It would be a material omission not to include this book. You know this is in history and politics, this one. Everyone knows who Bob Woodward is, so I don't think I need to give any background on him. A little while ago, he came out with a little book called Fear, which was also a notable 20 selection. And it sold over 1 million copies in its first week. So I think that was a pretty good pick. It caused a to-do because the book didn't include any interviews with the president, and the president called it a scam and called Woodward a liar. And so this time, as everyone knows, his new book, Rage, does include interviews with the president. In fact, 17 of them.
I thought it was 19.
17 between last December and this July. So current interviews. In addition, there's interviews with hundreds of other firsthand witnesses to things that have gone on in the administration, as well as their notes, their emails, their diaries, their calendars, and other documents. So whatever else this is, this has a ton of proof behind it.
Can I comment one thing?
You can.
Stephen Colbert had him on last night.
Yeah.
Oh, but I just couldn't sleep, so I was watching that.
And?
It was a really, really good interview with Bob Woodward. Very good. And he showed some of the clips, some of the video passages. He played them. So yeah, very interesting. You probably see it on YouTube.
Yeah, I'm sure you can. So we know there's rumors that there are letters in here between the president and the North Korea leader, Kim Jong-un. We know about the big early reveal, which is that the president was well aware of how bad the pandemic was going to be and kept it from us. I should mention that in the build up to the publication of this book, there's been a bit of a backlash about the fact that Woodward had that information and didn't share it. Trevor Noah on The Late Show did a little riff. Imagine if Paul Revere had ridden through Massachusetts and said, are the British coming? Pre-order my book on Amazon to find out, So there's a little bit of a backlash about that. I have no idea whether or not Woodward signed. I'm sure he signed a ton of documents to get all this access.
He responds to that question on Stephen.
Yes.
Okay. What did he say?
Yeah.
I can't remember.
Okay.
I heard. Yeah, I saw it.
But he did respond to
much
it.
of his response.
I saw it also last
Did
night.
you?
I thought he was much more relaxed
Yeah.
than the 60 Minutes interview. But his rationale last night was that on February 7th, he didn't know if the president was lying because the president lies. And it wasn't until he was able to
I remember.
triangulate the information and verify that in fact he was told this, that this was not a lie that he was saying. And it took several weeks to do that, he said.
Yeah, I remember him saying too, Susan, that Bob understood it, that he was referring to the virus.
China's
Not here, and that's why he didn't.
with the virus.
That's what it was.
So, who knows?
Okay. We could have a really interesting discussion about the morality of that, but I'm just throwing out there for full disclosure. There's every reason to think that this will be the biggest selling nonfiction book of the year. And so it's included here for your consideration.
Cindy,
yes, Willie.
he's being interviewed at 9 o'clock on.
Yes, he is tonight.
Okay, we'll be done by then. So we can
It
all,
did
I
not-
promise we'll be done by then.
Yeah, it did not get a good review today in the New York Times.
What did they say? I didn't even, what did they say?
They said that it was,
He was taking questions.
oh, I wish I could remember. The first paragraph is just great. But anyway.
I don't think it matters, to be honest.
Oh, no.
Right, in terms of how it's
How
going to
many
sell. I don't think it
copies?
matters.
How many copies is the library getting?
I don't know the answer to that, but I will find out the answer to that.
Well, when we can sign up for it, I want to sign up.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay,
Thank you.
me too.
I understand. I will, duly noted.
Thank you.
Okay. Next book. This is coming out
no,
next
she's good.
Tuesday. This is I actually put, this is Jane, this is Jodi Picoult's new novel, The Book of Two Ways. I put this after some back and forth, Willie, this is in popular fiction because she is the author of 25 novels, the
Mhm.
last 10 of which have hit #1 on the New York Times bestseller list, which is quite a streak.
Right.
And so I originally had it in other fiction and I moved it into popular fiction.
Popular.
She's 4 of her novels have been made into TV movies. 1 has been made into a movie, My Sister's Keeper, and Small Great Things, which is one of her most recent novels, is currently in the process of being made into a movie starring Julia Roberts and Viola Davis, just a few insignificant people. So Jodi Picoult is in the big leagues. Oh, look what Susan has. Jane Kleiman, Susan is holding up from Amazon her copy of Rage.
Good for you.
Just appeared on the front
Look at
page.
that. Just appeared. I'm sure there was a very strong embargo on any early release of that book. So in any event, so Jodi Picoult is a player, and when her books don't stay at the library, they go out constantly. We don't have them in. This book, the plot of this book is a really good example of what I'm noticing, and this is going to come up a little bit later. There's a new thread that's coming into fiction, which is, what if we had a do-over? What if we could go back and do things differently from how we had done them before? And my own view is that this is starting to crop into fiction because things feel like they're really messed up. And people kind of really, really would like to roll back the clock and rethink and take another look. The premise here is that the woman, the main character, a woman named Dawn, is happily married, has a child, has a job she likes, and is on a plane when the stewardess comes on and says that everyone needs to prepare for a crash landing. And she thinks she's going to die. And instead of thinking about her family, she thinks about her, a lost love, who was a fellow archaeologist when she used to be an archaeologist, she left him and she left the career 15 years ago. And when she doesn't die in the crash, she is very shaken by the fact that he is who she was thinking about and not her husband. And the airline says everyone gets transportation wherever it is they want to go. And she knows she should go home.
But she doesn't.
Right? But she sort of wants to go to the archaeological site and go find him. And the book spools in both directions.
There you go.
Which is unusual, which is a very interesting plot device. So somebody yesterday brought up the movie Sliding Doors as something like that. So she both goes home and she goes to the archaeological site to find him. And we sort of see that happen in real time, and what happens. And I think that's actually a great premise. And so there's no reason to think this book isn't going to be a #1 bestseller as well. But I think the plot point is really interesting. So again, that's The Book of Two Ways, and it is coming out next Tuesday. This is a treat, this one. Sylvia probably knows who Richard Osmond is, but I'm guessing no one else on this.
No, I don't. No, I
Really? Okay, no, you're off the spot. I'm not going to put you on the spot. He is a TV personality in the UK. He produces and directs and is the host of a bunch of quiz shows and panel shows. And so he's just a person, he's one of those kind of personalities. And the word on this book, Jane Kleiman, it's called The Thursday Murder Club, and it's by Richard Osman, Osman, is that there was a 10 publisher bidding war for it and a sequel, and that it was sold for a 7-figure sum.
Wow.
The word on this is also, just for extra vig, that Steven Spielberg has acquired the film rights to the book.
Which category?
This is mysteries and thrillers.
Oh, obviously,
Okay,
yes.
right. Here's the plot. We are in the lovely Kent, a lovely part of England, in a high-end retirement village where 4 70-something year-old men meet every Thursday in the jigsaw room of the retirement village to talk through unsolved crimes. And then, just for fun, guess what happens? There's a crime, a murder in the town. A local developer is found dead with a mysterious photograph left next to the body. And for the first time, they decide that they're going to get involved with the real life case. What more do you need to know about this? You want to read this book? Of course you want to read this book. I want to read this book. It's coming out next Tuesday. It's already out in the UK and is doing very, very well.
Not in there.
Hmm?
It's not in the mysteries and thrillers.
Yes, it is. I promise it is. Want me to show
Okay.
you?
I have to look again.
It's at the bottom of the first page.
So maybe it was cut off when I printed this.
Really, look at me. Right here on the first page of the mystery and thriller handout. Underneath, make them cry.
Mysteries and thrillers, make them cry. See, so what happens is when you have 11-inch paper,
This is legal paper. Willie, we'll print these for you in the library, okay?
yeah, I'm sorry, but that's what happened.
Okay.
It
I
cut off.
promise it's there.
I trust you, Cindy.
Okay,
Oh, yes, I found it.
thank you. Okay, next book. This is in literary fiction. Jack by Marilyn Robinson, which is coming out on September 29th. Marilyn Robinson is one of the finest writers of literary fiction and literary nonfiction working today. It's not something I say lightly. She is a professor at the Iowa Writers Workshop, and she lives in Iowa City. She was awarded the National Humanities Medal in 2012 by President Obama. She is incredibly wise, a philosophical and religious person, and also very literate. It's a very interesting combination. She has written a bunch of essay collections that are not for the faint of heart. They're very dense. They're really mind-blowing and thought-provoking, but they're very dense. Her novels, she's written 4 previous novels, 3 of which, up until now, everyone thought were a trilogy called the Gilead Trilogy, set in the fictional town of Gilead, Iowa. All 3 of them are beautiful, not long, very, very moving, and are very much on the pulse of the middle of this country. The first one, Gilead, which won the Pulitzer Prize and the National Book Critics Circle Award, is about a minister named John Ames who has married very late in life a much younger woman and has a young son. The book is a letter to his son because he doesn't think he's going to live to see his son grow up. The second book, called Home, which won the Women's Prize for Fiction and the Los Angeles Times Book Award, is about John Ames's best friend, the Reverend Robert Barton, who is dying and whose 2 children have come home, one to take care, his daughter to take care of him, and his son to try, his prodigal son, to try to make amends. The third book, called Lila, which also won the National Book Critics Circle Award, is about the minister John Ames's young wife, whose name is Lila, what brought her to Gilead, what caused her to marry a much older man, and why she stays. That's probably my favorite of the 3, but it's a very close call. And Jack is the name of the prodigal son of the Reverend, who we met in the second book. So he, in this 4th book, so it turns out that wasn't a trilogy, there's a 4th book. We get his story, and the focus of this book, Jack is a troubled man and a troubling man, and he is in love with a high school teacher who is not white. And the book is about him and about that. And as literary fiction goes, this is going to be a very big book of the fall. She has a tremendous following, and there's no reason to expect this isn't going to be as powerful and as beautifully written and as moving as the other 3. So that's Jack, and it is coming out on the 29th. I should say the 29th is a big day for fiction titles, as you'll see. The next book that I'm going to talk about that's coming out on the 29th, and I just saw Susan's big grin, is Nick Hornby's new novel, Just Like You. The Thursday Night Book Club people on the phone will remember that we read his last novel, Funny Girl, which we read that in 2017. It came out in 2015, and there has not been a novel from Nick Hornby for 5 years. So that's a reason enough to think this is going to be a significant deal. He's well known for his memoir, Fever Pitch, about his obsession with the Arsenal Football Club. That was made into a movie. High Fidelity, about his time working in a music shop. That's a novel, but it's obviously autobiographical. That was made into a movie. About a Boy was made into a movie with Hugh Grant. A bunch of his other books have been made into movies. He writes really engaging books about people who are very relatable, who are just a little obsessive, and they're very tongue-in-cheek. He has something to say, but he says it with a soft touch, and he's got a great following. This one is set in 2016, and it is about Lucy and Joseph. Lucy is in her early 40s. She is separated from her husband, who she married a guy from just like her, from her class, from her neighborhood, with the same life values and the same expectations. They had 2 kids, and it turns out he's a jerk. And now she's separated from him, and she's kind of upended by that. And Joseph is 22, and he works in their local butcher shop, and he also coaches an after-school soccer team, and he really hopes to become a DJ, and he lives with his mom, and they fall in love. And there's so much that's interesting about that idea, so much that's backwards and upside down, and it turns out that it's pretty great when they're alone together, but when they want to go out, things start to get a little tricky. And I just think this is going to be a delight. And so that's why I put it on the list. Also because I've actually gotten calls from friends of mine who are big Nick Hornby fans saying, why doesn't he have, has he stopped writing? Where's his next novel? Where's his next novel? So anyway, so that's coming out on the 29th. This is my favorite cover. Jane, I wish you could see this. This is my favorite cover of the 20, although Jack's cover was kind of nice. And there's another cover coming up that's also kind of nice.
Oh,
This is
clever.
The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. Sorry, Just Like You is in other fiction, and this is in other fiction. And they're right next to each other in the handout in case you're keeping score. Matt Haig this book is going to get him, I think, the recognition that he has so far not really had in this country. He's written a few novels. His most recent one is called How to Stop Time, and a memoir called Reasons to Stay Alive, which actually got a fair bit of attention and is what the title makes it sound like. This book is getting a lot of buzz, and it is another novel that's an example of what if we got a do-over, but it's even more complicated than that. The premise of this book, The Midnight Library, which, by the way, I like the word libraries in the title, is either, depending on which summary you read, exists somewhere between life and death, or somewhere on the edge of our existence. It has in it an infinite number of library books. And the reason it has an infinite number is that the first book is the book that contains the story of your life as you have lived it to that point. And the next book is the story of your life if at point A in your life, when you had to make a decision, instead of going this way, which is what you did, you went this way. And then the next book is what happens if you stayed on this path, but at point B, you went this way instead of this way. And this book is if you had in point A gone the other way, and then so forth and so on. And you start to see how, if you think about how many decisions you've made in your life that could have impacted the path of your life, how that spirals into an infinite number of books. And our main character, a woman named Nora, finds herself in this library, wondering whether she maybe could have made some of the decisions in her life a little bit better than she did. And the book is about what happens. So again, a tremendously great premise. I suspect done well, and it's getting a lot of attention already. That is coming out on the 29th. Okay, that's September. We're finally out of September. I think you know this, and I should have said this early. September and October are the two biggest publication months of the year in a normal year, and that's extra true now. So you'll see how this list is heavily swayed towards the early part of our 6-month publication window. The next book on the list is called The Cold Millions by Jess Walter. This is in literary fiction. Jess Walter started out his career in journalism and wrote a nonfiction book called Every Knee Shall Bow, which was a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize. He's gone on to write a short story collection and 6 novels. And the reason this book is on the list is that his last novel, his 6th novel, was a book called Beautiful Ruins, which spent 69 weeks on the New York Times bestseller list. 69. And when you write a book like that, it was named the Novel of the Year by NPR and by Esquire magazine. Your next book is going to get a lot of attention, and this is his next book. It has been described as Scorsese-esque, which already got my attention. It's set in the early part of the 20th century, and it is about 2 very poor young men who are day laborers, get involved with the union, start to agitate for the union, fall in with an activist and a vaudeville star who's got a mob boss who's watching her, and about all that kind of stuff that goes on that went on in that part of America's history. One summary said, it's populated by cops, drunks, variety girls, temperance ladies, job sharks, Pinkertons, wobblies, etc. But so if you like that sort of thing, you're going to like this. He's a really good writer. He's a really good storyteller. And because of how much love there was for Beautiful Ruins, there's going to be a lot of expectations and a lot of attention paid to this book. So this is The Cold Millions by Jess Walter, and it's coming out on October 6th. Okay, so when I'm preparing for this, Jane, I promise I'll tell you the book in a minute. When I'm preparing for this, I try to do a little biographical sketch of the author so that you know where the author's been, what else the author has done, why this is relevant. With this book, I didn't actually think I needed to do that. This book is called Is This Anything? And it's by Jerry Seinfeld. And it is coming out October 6th. And there's two key things to tell you about this book, and only two. The first is that it's his first book in 25 years. And the second is that it turns out that from his early years doing stand-up comedy, which he started doing when he was 21, which, in case you're wondering, was in 1975, he has written his own material and he has kept it. So this is what he said. Whenever I came up with a funny bit, whether it happened on a stage, in a conversation, or working it out on my big yellow legal pad, I kept it in one of those old school accordion folders. So you can imagine what this thing must look like. So I have everything I thought was worth saving from 45 years of hacking away at this. And what this book is his favorite material, organized by decade. And so we're going to get the evolution of his skill and of his thought process. And it's Jerry Seinfeld. So this is a big book. I actually don't remember whether I put this, I think this is in other nonfiction, Willie, before you ask. It's possible it's in biography or memoir.
Okay.
But I think it's in other nonfiction. You can see why I might have been torn about where to put it.
Sure.
Also, bio and memoir was the handout that was the hardest to make my long list short enough to fit into.
It's in other nonfiction.
Thank you. Whew, I got that right. Okay. It's in other nonfiction. So that's Is This Anything by Jerry Seinfeld. Is coming out October 6th. Every reason to think this will be a biggie. The next book, which is in biography, is called 150 Glimpses of the Beatles, and it's by Craig Brown. Susan, it's so great to be able to see you doing this because she has a huge grin on her face right now.
Shall I go get my I Love George button? Everybody else loved Paul, but
I know. No.
Or John, right. Okay, so Craig Brown is a, Sylvia, you want to chime in on Craig Brown or no?
No.
Okay, I'm not meaning to put you on the spot. He is a columnist, a critic, and a humorist. And he's won awards for all three of those things, sometimes in the same year. He's written for every British newspaper and magazine you've ever heard of, plus he also writes for Vanity Fair. And he's really, really good, and he's really cutting, and he's really dry. And the reason this book is here is because last year in this country, we got his last book, which is called 99 Glimpses of Princess Margaret. And if you have any interest in Princess Margaret and you have not read that book, you need to get your hands on it right away. It is a really interesting way to do biography. The glimpses in the title are anecdotes by people who either knew the subject or experienced the subject in some way. So instead of some sort of linear chronological narrative, we have these stories that together you form a composite of. And in Princess Margaret case, that's really effective because she was such a complicated woman. And there were so many different sides to her. And so in these 99 glimpses, you see all of that. And so with the Beatles, he's taking it up to 150 glimpses. He's got anecdotes and observations from very famous people. Bruce Springsteen is in here, Tom Hanks is in here, and also from people you've never heard of. But the collective point of this book is a take on the Beatles' role in forming the 60s, and also in the formation of music as it has come to be. So I think this is just going to be a great book and a big book because there's just way too many Beatles fans out there for it not to be. And that is coming out on October 13th. Okay, this is the other political book in the 20. And don't be mad at me about this one either. And you can, if you are, you can be mad at Julie Rio because she made sure I knew about this. This is American Crisis, Leadership Lessons from the COVID-19 Pandemic by Governor Andrew Cuomo. There are, if you have flipped through the handouts, especially on the nonfiction side, you will notice that there are a ton of pandemic books in there. There's actually a poetry collection of pandemic poems and an essay collection on living through the pandemic. But most of the pandemic books are nonfiction. I am sure we will see pandemic novels in the not too distant future. But I wanted to make sure there was a pandemic book in the Notable 20, and this is the one I picked. I picked it because whether you love him or you hate him, in March and through the spring, he was the guy you wanted to listen to on the subject of the COVID-19 pandemic. Not the president, and this is not a political statement, this is a fact. Not the president, not Fauci, not someone from the CDC or the WHO. His daily news briefings were the must-see TV of the spring. And I usually pick them up on Facebook because they were live streamed there. And the comments, even from people who were not in his party, they were watching him. They were paying really close attention to what he was saying. New York, as you may recall, was the epicenter. Connecticut was riding, I think it's fair to say, was riding on his coattails the whole way, holding on for dear life. And there's a reason that we are among the best states in the country in terms of the COVID-19 pandemic right now. So the book is the behind the scenes stuff that was going on as they were frantically trying to figure out how to handle this in New York. And also his thoughts about how to do it better. And because I think I think what I just said is not really something you can argue with, I think this is going to be a big seller. I think people are still looking for answers, still looking for leadership on the pandemic, and he's still the point person for a lot of people in this country. So that's American Crisis, and it's coming out on October 13th. Okay, now I'm going to share with you, and I'm cringing a little bit because actually with this crowd, this might be the roughest of the 3 nights for my reveal. I think everyone has guilty pleasure reading. At least I hope everyone has guilty pleasure reading. And this, Stephanie Plum is my guilty pleasure reading. Jane, the book that is up on the screen is called Fortune and Glory by Janet Ivanovich, and it is coming out on November 3rd. Janet Ivanovich, I found out about Stephanie Plum, who is the heroine of this series of books, and Willie, this is in popular fiction.
I'm sure.
When I read an article, I don't know, 10, let's say 10 years ago, about that contained recommendations if you were looking for books with strong-willed and feisty female heroines. And Stephanie Plum, who I'd never heard of these books, was on the list. And at the time, maybe there were 15 books in the series already out. The first one is called One for the Money, which was turned into a very bad movie. And I read One for the Money, and I laughed. I don't laugh out loud often when I'm reading books. I could not stop laughing. It was like candy. And I was hooked from the first book. And I went through, I probably read, I don't know why my dog is all of a sudden barking, and hopefully he will stop. It's my dog, in case everyone's looking at their dogs right now, but it's my dog. Hold on one second. What are you doing? Stop barking. Stop barking. Okay.
I think that's a commentary on that selection.
I am never going to hear the end of this, I know. Never. I haven't finished explaining. Okay, here's the deal on Stephanie Plum. So she lives in Trenton, New Jersey, and she is a bounty hunter. She works for her slimy cousin Vinny. Her sidekick is a woman named Lulu, who used to be a prostitute. She is dating a hot Italian cop named Joe Morelli, but she also has this flirtation, which is sometimes more than a flirtation, with a really hot, very successful bounty hunter named Ranger. Her parents live not that far away with her grandmother, who carries a gun and goes to all the funerals to check out the casket and have the cookies, and who likes to go to the casino and is a hoot and a half. And every single one is ridiculous, and I love them. I used to, in my prior career, have to commute a lot between New York and Washington, and these books were perfect for the train. Absolutely perfect for that Amtrak train ride. I should also say the reason these are in popular fiction is that every single one hits #1 on the New York Times without fail. Now, she's come out with a new Stephanie Plum book, Janet Ivanovich has, every single fall. And so you would be right to say, which is not what Julie meant, but I'm sure she could have meant, why this year, why now would you pick this book to be one of the notable 20s? And the answer is in the title. Every single one of the books has the number of the book in the series in the title and some sort of alliterative pun. So the 17th book was called Smokin' 17, and the 20th book was called Takedown 20, and the last book was called Twisted 26. And if you can see from this cover at the bottom, it does say Tantalizing 27, but that's not what it's called. It's called Fortune and Glory. And the 26th book, unlike every single other book in the series, ended with a cliffhanger and was different, just different. And it is my theory, and I could be wrong, and if I'm wrong, Julie Rio will be the first one to tell you that I'm wrong. It is my theory that this is the last book in the series, that she's actually going to end the series, that she's decided it's done. And that's why you've got this key on the cover. That's why it's called something different. That's why the last one was a cliffhanger. She's tying it up. I could be wrong, but that's what I think. And if I'm right, then it will be an even bigger book than all the others have already been. And so it's coming out November 3rd. She's what we call a tier 1 author. So we pre-ordered her book months ago, and I am first on the hold list for it. So too bad for you. But anyway, so I've now revealed my guilty reading pleasure. You can email me and tell me yours, and we'll be even. Okay. The next book is another one where you probably don't need any introduction on the author. This is Megan Rapinoe's memoir, before you ask what category this is in, One Life, that is coming out. Oh my goodness. Sorry, my daughter just walked in and the dog lost it. It's coming out November 10th. and this book has been in the works for a long time, and I've had it on my radar, and I've been watching, and I'm hoping this publication date holds. Megan, I mean, everyone knows, I hope, what Megan Rapinoe is up to these days, but what's interesting to me is that she is the youngest of 6 children who was raised in a conservative small town in Northern California. She started playing soccer when she was 4, and her family was very supportive of that, but also made sure she spent time volunteering at homeless shelters and at food banks. And so her whole life, she grew up with a passion for community engagement that mirrored her passion for soccer. And the book is about that, basically. The book is about how we all can have that kind of passion and bring that to bear in our own communities. She had demonstrated it very famously. She was the first high-profile white athlete to take a knee in solidarity with Colin Kaepernick. She got a lot of backlash for that, but she actually also got a ton of support for that. She is a tireless activist for LGBTQ rights. She is the face of the fight in women's soccer for equal pay with men, and so on and so on and so on. So this book is part memoir, but also part call to social activism. And she obviously has a huge, huge following. So I suspect this will be a big book. It is coming out on November 10th. Okay, the next book is my pick of the cajillion books in the handouts that take on the Black Lives Matter movement and the racial disquiet that is happening in this country. It's called Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Man. It's by Emmanuel Acho, and it's coming, Acho, sorry, it's Acho, A-C-H-O, and it's also coming out on November 10th. So Emmanuel Acho, until 2016, was actually an NFL, a college football and NFL star. He's from Texas. He went to the University of Texas. He played for the Texas Longhorns, which is pretty big in college football. He was drafted by the Cleveland Browns, and then he played for the Philadelphia Eagles. And then he went into sports broadcasting, and he was the youngest national football analyst for ESPN ever. And he now works for Fox Sports. So he's young, and he's very facile with talking to people and making people feel comfortable. People like him. He recently started an online video series called Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Man, which has gone viral. The premise of the show is, and these are his words, racism is not a virus of the body, it is a virus of the mind. You cannot fix a problem that you do not know you have. There is a fix, but in order to access it, we're going to have some uncomfortable conversations. And so he is answering the questions that white people do not feel they can ask, such as, how can I have white privilege if I'm not wealthy? Is racial profiling a problem if Black people tend to commit more crimes? Or if Black people can say the N-word, why can't I? These are questions that a lot of people feel are really icky to ask, but are sort of on their minds. He recently had the NFL commissioner, Roger Goodall, on. That was a 2-part series. You can imagine how interesting that uncomfortable conversation was. So the videos have really taken off, and he's turning this whole concept into a book, which is being supported and helped brought out by Oprah Winfrey. So again, there are a lot of books in the handouts that come at the issue of racism in this country from a different perspective, but I think this one, for the reasons that I just said, is one of the ones that's going to get an extra amount of attention. And so I included it in the notable 20. Okay, we are skipping now right into January. December is not a strong month for new book releases. The whole vig of having a ton of book releases in September and October is that you get the hype, you get word of mouth, you get the hype up, and then everyone wants to buy the book to give us gifts for Christmas or Hanukkah or Kwanzaa or whatever. So there's no December on this list. That wasn't deliberate. It's just how it is. There are books in the handouts that are coming out in December. It's not like nothing's coming out in December, but we're going right to January. And the short story pick for the notable 20, and it's called That Old Country Music, and it's by Kevin Barry. Kevin Barry is one of those classic Irish writers. He's an Irish storyteller who is really, really gifted with words. He has only written 3 novels. The last one, Night Boat to Tangier, which was terrific, was shortlisted for the Booker Prize. The prior one, Beetlebone, which imagines John Lennon showing up in a small remote town in County Donegal, won the Goldsmiths Prize. So he's all that. And these short stories are, they're set in rural Ireland on the West Coast, and imagine sort of Ireland in great flux, shifting to more modern, but still clinging to the old ways. And his characters are grappling with all of that and with love and all the great stuff that makes Irish literature so meaty and wonderful. And because I think he's really on a writer's sort of uptick trajectory, I picked this one out of the short story collections to highlight for you. So again, we're in January, and who knows how accurate this particular, I mean, all these publication dates now could be completely, we could be talking about this book next spring. I have no idea, but it's right now coming out on January 26th. Okay, this is the book that Jane and I were talking about on the desk last week. It was the last book that I chose to include in these handouts. It's called Robert E. Lee and Me. I am pretty certain, Willie, that this is in history, although it arguably could be in memoir, but I'm pretty sure it's in history. It's by Ty Sedgwill, who spent 36 years in the US Army. He retired as a brigadier general. He spent 2 decades as a history teacher at West Point, including being head of the department. Right now, he's a visiting professor at Hamilton College, and he's a New American Fellow. So he's pretty credentialed as military history goes. He's actually written an award-winning West Point history of the Civil War and a bunch of other books and articles on military history. He's also from the South, and grew up revering Robert E. Lee. He grew up understanding that Robert E. Lee was not only the best general who's ever lived, but the greatest American who has ever lived. Every part of his life reinforced this idea that the Confederates were underdogs who lost the Civil War with honor. And even his years in the Army did nothing to change his mind about that. If anything, they reinforced it. And now that he is retired from the Army, retired from his professor life at West Point, he has cause to sit back and reflect, and he has decided that he was wrong, and that the Southern view of American history is wrong. And the book is part history lecture, part memoir, and part sort of a meditation on the Civil War and the fallout from the Civil War. And so in a way, I think that this is a super compelling example of one of the other issues that's making the country crazy right now, which is what do we do with the statues and other emblems of the Confederacy. And given his pedigree and his background. I mean, if this book were being written by some Northern intellectual, liberal elite person, it would be completely blown off. But given who he is and given where he's been, I think this is going to get attention. I personally really want to read it. When I told Jane about it, she said she really wanted to read it, and I think it's going to be one of those books that people are going to talk about. Again, who knows when it's actually going to be published, but it's right now scheduled to be published at the end of January 26th.
Do you know where he lives now?
I do not, but I'm pretty sure I could find out if you would like. Why do you ask, Sylvia?
Well, I wonder how this book's going to be received by people who of his prior views,
Yes.
and ergo, where does he live, and how what's his life going to be like when this book comes out if he lives in the South?
Great question. Let me see what I can find out. My hunch is he doesn't, since he spent so long living at West Point.
Well, that's what I wonder.
Yeah,
Plus,
but,
you know,
but we'll see. We'll see what I can find out. Okay, two more. This is mystery and thriller. Jane Harper's The Survivors. We don't get a lot. We actually, and I don't know why this is, we don't see a ton of Australian books in this country. We see a ton of UK books and not a ton of Australia or New Zealand fiction or nonfiction, for that matter. And I mean, there are a couple of exceptions to that, obviously, but I don't know why there isn't more of a pipeline. And Jane Harper is an Australian crime novelist who would be the kind of person who could break through. She's written 3 prior crime books called The Dry Force of Nature and The Lost Man. The library has all 3 of them. They have each won every crime novel award that exists in both Australia and in the UK. So in those countries, when she has a new book out, it is a thing. And I think that will eventually happen here too. I have read those 3. And if you're into that sort of thing, they're really good. They're all set in the Australian outback, which again is a landscape I know very little about. She does a very good job of bringing the sense of it, the sense of the place into the book. The books are dark. Bad stuff happens. Bad stuff causes bad stuff to happen. And it's families burying secrets and the secrets inevitably coming to light and so forth and so on. This new book, which is scheduled to come out on February 2nd in this country, is set on the Tasmanian coast. So she's moved her geography. And again, that's a part of the world I know very little about. And I'm pretty sure she's going to make it very atmospheric and very dark and very page-turnery, but in a literate way. So if you're into this sort of stuff, she's someone you want to read. And again, we've got all 3 of her books. I don't even know that I could tell you which one I like the best. They're really good. And The Survivors is coming out on February 2nd. Last book is historical fiction, which is another fiction. And it's Kristen Hanna's new book, The 4 Winds. She is another one, kind of like Jodi Picoult, who's written a ton of novels and has lately just started to hit it. She's got 17 prior novels, and the last 2 have been mega. The last 2, The Nightingale and The Great Alone, are books that we cannot keep in the library, kind of almost like, not as big as Where the Crawdads Sing, but similar kind of word of mouth. Everyone wants the book. We can't keep them in. Nightingale, which is being made into a movie, was named the best book of the year by the Wall Street Journal. The Great Alone came out 3 years ago, and we could still barely keep a copy in the library. And again, those 2 are both World War II books. This one, The 4 Winds, which is scheduled to come out on February 9th, is a Great Depression book. It opens in Texas in 1934 on a farm that is failing, and a family has to decide whether to stay and try to make it work or to head west towards California. So it has sort of a Grapes of Wrath overtone. Given the success of her last two books, I suspect this is going to be huge when it comes out, if it comes out on February 9th. And so I included it here. And those are all 20 of the notable 20s.
Wow.
So thank you for that. So here we are. So Willie, I just saw your chat. Could Cindy tell us? So if you've muted, there's Julie. If you've muted, and it would be great if you unmuted for this last bit, because first of all, if anyone has any questions, please ask them. Although you've been great in interrupting me, which I really liked. And second, Willie, yes, go.
Well, I was going to ask it about the Australian mystery writer, because we do see a lot of Australian mystery programming, I believe.
We do.
I'm curious if it's a known detective or if it's a series that we may have seen on TV.
Nope.
Thank
Nope. So I always love to hear which of the 20 books you are most eager to read. If all 20 books were sitting on your desk right now, which one would you grab? I guess Susan would say Rage, since she grabbed it already.
It's already on her desk.
It's already on her desk.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. I mean,
Midnight Library.
Midnight Library? I thought you were going to say Megan Rapinoe's book.
Oh, well, that'll be a close second, and then the Beatles one third.
Right?
Yeah.
I know, Midnight Library. I just love that cover too.
As you've been talking, I've been putting things on hold at the library and making sure they're in my Baker and Taylor cart for ordering. So
Excellent.
Thank you.
This is so good. So multitasking. Excellent of you. I'm so pleased. That is the way to go.
Well,
and who else?
I'm very eager to read Jax, the Marilyn Robinson, because I love her. I love that family and the characters and that whole little saga there. But I have a feeling that the actual one that my hand would actually pick up is the Australian crime. I think my mind would reach for Marilyn Robinson, but my hand would land on the Australian.
There you go. Who else? Yes, Willie.
I would be interested in the Conversations book. So.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I know Leah was excited about that one. Leah was like, you got to include that one.
Because I'm uncomfortable about the topic to begin with. So
there you go.
The videos are very good too, if you want to start there.
The videos, and what are they on? The same title?
The same name. Yep.
And they're on YouTube?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
But if you Google him, you can go to his website and he's got the links to everything too.
I see. I don't do much with YouTube. It's something I'm not that familiar with.
I just, it's the way to use it. I mean, you know, Willie, how sometimes I've been, for background on the book club books, I've been sending links and they're often just YouTube video links. It's just a way, now I use it, it's a way to do research.
Yes, I appreciate they come. It's just so overwhelming. So I like to have a target reason.
That's true. That is true. What about you, Jane? Any favorites?
Which Jane?
You.
Conversations, I think. And I think I'm going to read Rage.
Yeah. It's probably going to piss you off.
Yeah.
That's what I'm worried about in reading it, actually. That it's just going to make me really pissed, and I'm not sure I feel like being even more pissed.
Yeah.
Pat, any favorites?
The Hannah, Christian Hannon.
Oh.
I'd like to read her. For sure.
Yeah.
And who was the author of General Lee and Me? And what is
I-T-Y Sedule, S-E-I-D-U-L-E.
Yeah, I'm going to do that one.
Yeah, I would like to read Uncomfortable Conversations, for sure. Of course, the Beatles book, but I am reading
I know, Duchess of Goldblatt, I know.
Duchess Goldblatt.
That's a, you know, that is such a cult thing. I don't even know how to explain that to people.
I don't either. I mean, this is a nonfiction memoir.
Yep.
And this is a woman a writer who had some pretty hard times, and she created this Twitter character, Duchess Goldblatt, and people follow her. I do now, and we call her Your Grace. And she just says wonderful, silly things that are, for example, for my visit to the Dorothy Parker Academy, I'm trying to choose one of the more joyful Christmas carols about divorce and the discovery process. And then people just respond on Twitter. Most recently, the way I accessed her was she had a dog show. Today, open the gates and we'll have a dog show. And people, I didn't, but people sent in pictures of their dogs, and she responded. And I mean, there are hundreds, if not more than that. And it was just such a relief from some of the things that are on Twitter and that are going on. So I just got the book today, and then Rage arrived. So I'm going to put Rage on the back burner and finish Duchess Goldblatt.
What's her name again, Sue?
Well, the author is anonymous.
Oh, okay.
Right, but it's Becoming Duchess Goldblatt.
Becoming Duchess Goldblatt.
Okay.
And if you go on Twitter and just put Duchess Goldblatt in, it's sort of a crazy thing.
Mm-hmm.
Jane Kleiman, do you have anything you want to add? Any favorite books?
Well, I wanted to thank you very much for telling me what I wasn't able to see. What I'm thinking is, I want to see a list of all of them. Will you do it up as a single list now that you've done the 3 groups?
I have done it up as a list, and I can send it to you. Leah, what are we doing in terms of the website? Are we doing something on the website?
Yep. So all of the files that you guys were sent, as well as the Notable 20 when it's ready, and as well as the video, will all be going up on our website starting probably Thursday.
Oh, good.
I'm going to be interested in the follow-up to what happens with the guy who taught at West Point that actually changed his mind. I don't mean it's going to be the first book I read, but I'm very curious about what kind of grief he gets from people for changing his statement, because there's probably a lot of people that have felt like he exonerated a lot of the Confederates, and then now, so it's kind of like what slant was he taking when he defended him that he's now changed. So I'm very interested in the follow-up to that as much as reading it. Yeah. Otherwise, I want to read them all.
Me too. Except
and a few more on the list that you didn't pick too.
And a few more from the handouts as well. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, one of the ones I noticed was Why Dante Matters.
Yeah.
And
I want to read that too. I know. I didn't think that was Notable 20, but definitely that's on my list. Any other questions? Any other thoughts?
I did want to share one thing about Becoming, the book you mentioned. I had the pleasure of listening to it. And Michelle Obama reads it as if, she's talking with you. And I listen a lot in the automobile, and I felt that she was in my passenger seat. And it was a very nice.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
it's great.
He also has a great podcast that's just started on Spotify, which you can get for free.
Yep.
And same thing. It just makes you feel like you're sitting at the kitchen table with her.
Mhm.
Hmm. Interesting.
Thank you, Cindy.
Thank you,
Thank you,
guys.
Cindy. That was fabulous.
Thanks for
Thank you,
spending
thank
your
you,
2
thank
days.
you. Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
My
Wish we
first
could be
time doing
together, but-
hearing this. Great. Thank you.
Pat.
That's
Oh,
fine.
until next year.
Hopefully in the spring, we might be able to do this together. We'll see. That's
Yeah.
the goal.
Oh, I
That'd
like
be
this a
nice.
lot.
I like
Thank
it
you.
like this.
And maybe-
Well, we'll do it both ways then. We'll do it always. I'll just do it every day.
Yeah. That's reasonable.
Maybe my computer will work too.
There you go.
Okay. Thank you. Good
Thank
Thank
night.
you,
Good
everyone.
night,
Have a wonderful
everyone.
evening.
Thank you.
See you Thursday.
See you Thursday, next round.
Right.